In the besieged Coast Valley, 620 Marines were surrounded by dense fire for 19 hours. Command issued the order: no intervention, zero chance of survival. But atop Ridge 47, Sergeant Alex Rowan, a veteran female sniper whose capabilities the military had doubted, heard desperate voices crackling through the radio. She understood. If she waited for orders, the entire battalion would die. Through fog-shrouded darkness and crimson flares, she abandoned protocol, released the safety, climbed the blizzard-swept peak, and began a one-woman counterattack that would completely change the battlefield's outcome. November 2008. Khost Province, Eastern Afghanistan. The valley earned its nickname honestly. The meat grinder had claimed more American lives per square mile than any other operational zone in the theater. 3 parallel ridgelines created natural kill zones where insurgent forces could establish overlapping fields of fire. Every patrol that entered risked ambush. Every convoy faced potential annihilation. Sergeant Alex Rowan had studied these mountains for 8 months from Forward Operating Base Wilderness. At 31, she'd completed 4 deployments and logged over 200 confirmed kills as a Marine Scout sniper. Her service record was exemplary. Her evaluations, however, told a different story. Lacks situational awareness under pressure. Questions orders excessively. Struggles with team cohesion. The unwritten subtext was simpler. She was a woman in a role the Corps barely acknowledged women could fill. 2 years earlier, during Operation Whalers, Alex had advocated loudly against a patrol route through the Korengal Valley. Her analysis of terrain and known insurgent positions suggested an alternative approach. Her commanding officer, Captain Bradley Carmichael, dismissed her assessment. 7 Marines died in the resulting ambush. The after-action review vindicated her analysis, but the stain remained. She'd been right, but she'd also been insubordinate in how forcefully she'd argued her case. Now, she sat in the observation post on Ridge 22, watching through high-powered optics as Battalion 2/7ths prepared to move through Coast Valley's southern approach. The mission brief had been straightforward: establish a patrol base at Grid, November Victor 4-2, deny insurgent movement along Highway 1, maintain until relieved. Alex's spotting partner, Corporal Derek Hayes, adjusted his position beside her. Command says the valley's been quiet for 3 weeks. Maybe the Hajis moved on, or they're waiting for something worth the ammunition, Alex replied, her eyes still pressed to the scope. She'd been mapping firing positions all morning. The ridgelines across the valley showed too many optimal sniper hides. The tree line at the valley's northern mouth offered perfect concealment for crew-served weapons. The whole geometry of the terrain screamed ambush. She'd sent 3 separate intelligence reports through proper channels. Each one highlighted the tactical vulnerability. Each one received the same response. Assessment noted. Mission parameters unchanged. The radio on her vest crackled. Overwatch 2-3, this is Battalion TOC. Be advised, rules of engagement remain weapons tight. No fire unless directly engaged. Confirm copy. Alex keyed her handset. Copy. Weapons tight. Overwatch 2-3 standing by. Hayes gave her a questioning look. They really think we can watch a battalion move through that valley and keep our rifles cold? They're worried about escalation, Alex said, though the explanation felt hollow even as she spoke it. Intelligence suggests there's a larger insurgent force in the region. They don't want us provoking a fight we can't finish. So we watch our guys walk into a trap and do nothing? Alex didn't answer. She was watching Battalion 2/7th's lead elements enter the valley floor. Infantry fighting vehicles spreading out in a wedge formation. Dismounted Marines moving in tactical columns. Professional. Disciplined. Exactly by the book. The insurgents would wait until the entire battalion was committed. They'd wait until the terrain eliminated any chance of rapid withdrawal. They'd wait until the killing could be done efficiently. Alex checked her rifle. A modified M40A3 with a Schmidt and Bender scope, she'd personally zeroed to 1,400 meters. She'd cleaned it that morning. She checked it again anyway, running through the ritual that had kept her alive through 4 deployments. Bolt, chamber, magazine, scope adjustments, wind calculations. Hayes was right to be worried. Alex's instincts, honed through years of reading terrain and enemy behavior, screamed that something was catastrophically wrong with this operation. But instincts didn't override orders. Not anymore. Not after Korengal. She settled behind her rifle and waited for the inevitable. The attack began at 1,447 hours. Battalion 2/7 had penetrated 4 kilometers into Coast Valley when the first RPG streaked down from the western ridgeline. It struck the lead Humvee's engine block, transforming the vehicle into a fireball that sent black smoke billowing into the thin mountain air. Then the valley erupted. Alex watched through her scope as carefully positioned machine gun nests opened fire from 3 directions simultaneously. Mortars began walking across the battalion's formation, the insurgents demonstrating frightening accuracy and fire discipline. This wasn't opportunistic harassment. This was a prepared, rehearsed ambush by a competent enemy force. Contact, contact. The radio erupted with overlapping transmissions, taking effective fire from Ridge West. Approximately 300 enemy fighters. We've got PKM fire raking our position. Need immediate. Vehicle 4 is disabled. Multiple casualties. Requesting fire support. Requesting air support. Requesting. Hayes had his own spotting scope trained on the valley. Jesus Christ. They're getting shredded. The insurgents had chosen their ground perfectly. The valley floor offered minimal cover. The Marines' vehicles became stationary targets as terrain funneled them into predetermined kill zones. Dismounted infantry tried to establish defensive positions, but every piece of available cover had been pre-sighted by enemy gunners. Alex's breathing remained controlled, professional, as she acquired targets through her scope. A machine gun team at 800 meters, a mortar crew at 1,100 meters, an insurgent commander directing fire from 950 meters. Each shot was available. Each shot was clear. Her finger rested outside the trigger guard. Weapons tight. Do not engage unless directly engaged. The battalion's tactical frequency had descended into controlled chaos. Officers and NCOs shouted orders, trying to coordinate a defense while casualties mounted. The battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Bradshaw, transmitted calmly despite the hell unfolding around him. All Wolfpack elements. Consolidate your positions. Air support is inbound. ETA 30 minutes. Hold your ground. Medevac is staging at FOB Wilderness. We will get our wounded out. Stay focused. Stay professional. 30 minutes. Alex had been in enough firefights to know that 30 minutes under sustained heavy fire might as well be 30 hours. The Marines were dying now. She could see them through her scope, dragging wounded behind inadequate cover, returning fire with whatever weapons they could bring to bear. Hayes keyed his radio to the Battalion Tactical Operations Center. TOC, this is Overwatch 2-3. We have clear lines of fire on multiple high-value targets. Request authorization to engage. The response came back within seconds. Overwatch 2-3, negative. Weapon status remains tight. Intelligence indicates engaging will trigger response from additional enemy forces in the region. Larger enemy formation is believed to be observing. Do not reveal your position. Confirm copy. Alex felt something cold settle in her chest. They wanted her to watch. They wanted her to maintain her position while fellow Marines died because someone at headquarters worried about the tactical implications of defending them. Overwatch 2-3 copies. Hayes transmitted, his voice tight. He looked at Alex. This is insane. The firefight intensified. Enemy forces began maneuvering, attempting to flank the battalion's defensive perimeter. More RPGs streaked through the air. The distinctive crack of AK-47 seconds formed a continuous backdrop to heavier machine gun fire and mortar impacts. Alex watched a young Marine, couldn't have been more than 19, attempt to drag his wounded squad leader toward cover. A burst of machine gun fire cut him down mid-stride. Both men lay motionless, her jaw clenched. Her finger remained outside the trigger guard. Wolfpack elements, be advised. Lieutenant Colonel Bradshaw's voice carried new strain. Air support has been diverted to troops in contact in Helmand Province. Revised ETA is 90 minutes. Continue to hold positions. Medevac birds are inbound for critical casualties. 90 minutes. The battalion was going to be destroyed in 90 minutes. By 1600 hours, the situation had deteriorated from critical to catastrophic. Battalion 2/7 had consolidated into a desperate defensive perimeter, roughly 200 meters in diameter. 3 of their 7 vehicles were destroyed. Casualty estimates exceeded 30%. Ammunition was running low. The insurgents, sensing vulnerability, increased pressure from all sides. Alex had remained behind her rifle for over an hour, watching fellow Marines fight and die while her weapon stayed cold. Professional detachment was failing. Each death she witnessed through her scope felt personal, felt preventable. The radio brought worse news. All stations, this is Wolfpack 6. Lieutenant Colonel Bradshaw's voice had gone flat, drained of the optimism commanders needed to project. Be advised, medevac has been denied. Landing zone is too hot. Air support remains unavailable due to weather moving into region. We are weapons free. Repeat, weapons free. Make every round count. Wolfpack, 6 out. Hayes stared at the radio. They're abandoning them. They're making tactical calculations, Alex said, though the words tasted like ash. Higher headquarters was writing off 620 Marines because extracting them would cost more resources than command was willing to commit. The mathematics of war, reduced to an equation where lives became acceptable losses. A new voice crackled through on the emergency frequency. Young, terrified, barely audible through static and background fire. Anyone out there? This is Corporal Jennings. 3rd Platoon, Bravo Company. We're getting overrun on the perimeter. If there's anybody listening, please. The transmission cut off abruptly. Alex's hands tightened on her rifle. Corporal Jennings, she'd met him during pre-deployment training, fresh out of School of Infantry, eager, convinced he was invincible the way all 19-year-olds are convinced. She'd told him to keep his head down, trust his training, look after his fire team. Hayes was watching her. Alex, don't. Don't what? Whatever you're thinking. Remember Korengel? Remember what happened last time you went against orders? She did remember. She remembered being right. She remembered 7 flag-draped coffins at Dover Air Force Base. She remembered Captain Carmichael's face at the memorial service. The guilt there, the resentment toward her for being the one who'd predicted it. Her radio chirped. Overwatch 2-3, this is Major Frost. Her immediate commanding officer, calling on their dedicated frequency. Sergeant Rowan, I know what you're considering. I need you to stand down. That's a direct order. Your position is for observation only. Engaging will compromise your location and eliminate our only intelligence asset in the region. Acknowledge. Major Catherine Frost had been Alex's commander for 6 months. A capable officer who'd fought her own battles against institutional skepticism about women in combat roles. She understood what Alex was feeling. The order came from someone who'd stood where Alex stood now. Alex keyed her handset. Overwatch 2-3 acknowledges. Alex. Frost's voice softened slightly. I know this is hard, but you have to trust the system. Higher command is making decisions with information we don't have. Our job is to follow orders, even when those orders hurt. Can you do that? Through her scope, Alex watched an insurgent mortar team adjust their aim. The next round would land directly on a casualty collection point where wounded Marines awaited evacuation that would never come. She could make the shot. 1,050 meters. Slight crosswind. Elevated shooting position. The trajectory calculations ran automatically through her mind. Muscle memory from 1,000 repetitions. Sergeant Rowan, I need verbal confirmation that you will not engage. Alex's finger moved to the trigger guard, not inside, just resting against the metal. Ma'am, she said quietly, I need to go dark for operational security. Overwatch 2-3 out. She switched off her radio before Frost could respond. Hayes grabbed her arm. Alex, what are you doing? What I should have done in Korengel. She pulled free, methodically checking her equipment. 4 magazines of match-grade 7.62mm ammunition. Rangefinder. Ballistics calculator. Medical kit. Water. They'll court-martial you. Again. And this time, they'll convict. Probably. Alex pulled out her notebook, the small green field journal she'd carried through 4 deployments. She wrote quickly, her handwriting cramped but legible. Asterisk. Major Frost. Asterisk. Asterisk. By the time you read this, I will have violated direct orders and engaged enemy forces in support of Battalion 2/7. This decision is mine alone. Corporal Hayes attempted to stop me. Any disciplinary action should be directed solely at me. Asterisk. Asterisk. I have observed the battalion for 97 minutes. Current casualty estimate is 187 wounded, 34 confirmed Kia. Enemy force strength approximately 380 fighters with crew-served weapons and mortars. Battalion ammunition supply is critically low. Without intervention, they will be overrun within the hour. Asterisk. I understand the consequences of disobeying orders, but I cannot watch fellow Marines die when I have the capability to affect the outcome. If command court-martials me, I will accept that judgment, but I will not accept watching 620 Marines be sacrificed because I was too afraid to act. Asterisk. The system failed them. I won't. Asterisk. Respectfully. Asterisk. Sergeant Alex Rowan. Asterisk. She tore out the page and handed it to Hayes. Give this to Frost after I'm gone. And Derek, tell her I'm sorry. Sorry for what? For being right again. Alex slung her rifle across her back and began moving. Where are you going? You can engage from here. Ridge 47. She pointed to the high peak northwest of their position, nearly 800 meters higher in elevation and 3 kilometers distant. Better angle on the valley. I can cover more of their perimeter from there. Hayes looked at the ridge, then back at her. That's a 2-hour climb in good weather. In this wind, 3 hours minimum. The battalion won't last that long. Then I'd better move fast. She'd studied Ridge 47 through her scope dozens of times. The approach was technical, exposed to wind, potentially lethal in the gathering storm. The military had deemed it too dangerous to position observers there, which meant it would be the last place the insurgents expected fire to come from. Hayes stood, conflicted emotions warring across his face. Finally, he pulled his sidearm and held it out. Take my Beretta, extra magazines are in the dump pouch. Derek, you don't have to. I'm not helping you disobey orders. He cut her off. I'm providing a fellow Marine with equipment for a combat operation. There's a difference. He managed a tight smile. Besides, someone needs to keep documentation of the dumbest, bravest thing I've ever seen. Alex took the pistol, checked the chamber, holstered it. If this goes wrong, it won't. You're the best shot in the battalion. Probably the best shot in the Corps. Hayes keyed his radio back to battalion frequency. I'll monitor their situation. If it gets desperate, I'll try to relay information on your secondary frick. Can't promise it won't get jammed though. Understood. Alex took one last look at the valley below, at the shrinking Marine perimeter, at the converging insurgent forces. The tactical situation was deteriorating by the minute. She'd need to move fast, climb faster, and start shooting before the mathematics of combat made salvation impossible. She pulled her notebook out again, flipped to the front page where she'd taped a photo. Her older brother, Staff Sergeant David Rowan, killed in action in Fallujah 4 years earlier. He'd been a scout sniper too, the best she'd ever known. Asterisk. For you, asterisk, she thought. Asterisk. And for everyone we couldn't save. Asterisk. Then Alex Rowan began to run. The first 500 meters were deceptive. Relatively gentle slope, decent footing, manageable wind. Alex pushed hard, her breathing controlled, but labored under the weight of rifle, ammunition, and equipment. The temperature was dropping as altitude increased and weather moved in. By meter 800, the terrain turned hostile. The slope steepened to nearly 45 degrees in places. Loose scree made every step treacherous. Alex had to holster her rifle across her back and use both hands to maintain progress, grabbing exposed rocks and sparse vegetation. Her old injury from Fallujah, a partially healed fracture in her left ankle, began sending sharp protests up her leg. She ignored it. Ignored the wind that threatened to tear her from the mountain face. Ignored the burning in her lungs as the air thinned. Focused only on the next handhold, the next foothold, the next meter. At 1,200 meters up the ridge, she encountered something unexpected. 2 Marines, both wounded, had taken shelter in a small depression. They wore the distinctive patches of Battalion 2/7's reconnaissance unit. The younger one, Lance Corporal by his insignia, had a field dressing wrapped around his thigh, blood seeping through. The other, a sergeant with a face weathered by multiple deployments, had his arm in an improvised sling. They stared at Alex as she approached, clearly not expecting to see anyone, much less a Marine scout sniper, climbing toward the summit. "Ma'am," the sergeant said, using his good arm to gesture vaguely toward the valley. "If you're trying to get an elevated position to observe the fight, I should tell you there's no radio relay from up here. "We've been trying for an hour." Alex knelt beside them, assessing their wounds quickly. "Not here to observe, here to shoot." "How bad are you hurt?" "Nothing that won't heal, if we survive the day." The sergeant studied her face. "You're Rowan. Heard about you. They say you can hit targets most snipers can't even see." "They exaggerate." Alex pulled out her medical kit, replacing the lance corporal's soaked dressing with fresh gauze and applying a proper pressure bandage. "Your leg?" "Shrapnel from a mortar. Hurts like hell, but I can walk." "Then start walking. Head northeast toward Fob Wilderness. Stay off the ridgeline and you should be able to avoid enemy observation. It's about 8 clicks." The lance corporal looked confused. "Ma'am, we're supposed to maintain position. Our orders—" "Your orders are to survive," Alex interrupted. "Your unit is combat ineffective. You're wounded. The tactical situation has changed. Get to safety." "That's an order from a senior NCO." The sergeant helped his companion to his feet, but paused before leaving. "What you're doing, going up there alone, is probably stupid," Alex finished. "But someone has to try. Now move out before the weather gets worse." She watched them limp away toward safety, then resumed her climb. The final 400 meters were the worst. The wind had picked up to dangerous levels, gusting hard enough to affect her balance. Visibility decreased as clouds descended around the ridge. Her hands were numb despite her gloves. Her ankles screamed with every step. She focused on technique, on breathing, on the mechanical process of ascent. Left hand, left foot, right foot. Repeat. Don't think about the drop. Don't think about the exhaustion. Don't think about the Marines dying in the valley below. At 1,745 hours, 3 hours and 18 minutes after leaving her observation post, Alex Rowan pulled herself over the final rock outcropping and onto the summit of Ridge 47. The view was staggering. The entire coast valley spread out below her, a tactical map rendered in terrain and fire and dying men. The battalion's perimeter had shrunk further. Insurgent forces were massing for what looked like a final assault from multiple directions. Alex unslung her rifle and began setting up her shooting position. She had clear sight lines to almost every enemy position in the valley. Range to the nearest targets, 1,100 meters. Range to the farthest, 1,850 meters. She pulled out her rangefinder and ballistics calculator and got to work. There was no time for exhaustion. The math required precision. The wind was approximately 15 miles per hour from the northwest, gusting to 22. Altitude differential, 831 meters above the valley floor. Air temperature, 42 degrees Fahrenheit. Barometric pressure, slightly below standard. Each variable would affect bullet trajectory. Alex ran the calculations in her head, double-checked them with her equipment, then began adjusting her scope's turrets. The Marines below didn't know salvation was coming. They didn't know that someone had finally decided their lives were worth the risk. She chambered around and settled behind her rifle. Time to work. Alex's first target was the insurgent commander coordinating the assault on the battalion's western perimeter. Through her scope, she watched him standing exposed on a slight rise, directing teams of fighters with confident hand signals. He wore a distinctive brown pakol hat and carried a radio. Taking him down would disrupt enemy command and control, forcing subordinate leaders to make decisions without coordination. Range, 1,247 meters. Wind, 17 miles per hour, quartering from right to left. Target elevation, 14 meters below her position, accounting for downhill shooting angle. Alex's breathing slowed. Her heartbeat steadied. The world narrowed to the sight picture in her scope, the crosshairs settling on the commander's center mass. She calculated the hold, adjusted for wind drift, accounted for bullet drop. The moment between heartbeats, when the body is most still, that's when you squeeze the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. The report echoed across the valley. 1.8 seconds later, the insurgent commander collapsed as the 168-grain Sierra Match King bullet struck exactly where Alex had aimed. His fighters stared in confusion at where their leader had been standing moments before. Alex was already acquiring her second target, an insurgent machine gunner, PKM, mounted on a tripod, systematically raking the Marines' southern perimeter. The gun crew had discipline and skill, firing controlled bursts from a fortified position. Range, 1,098 meters. Slight wind change, now 15 miles per hour. She led the target slightly, anticipating the gunner's movement as he adjusted his aim, squeezed the trigger. The gunner slumped over his weapon. Before his assistant could react, Alex had chambered another round and fired again, 2 down. The insurgents were starting to realize they were taking fire, but they didn't know from where. Their positions had been carefully chosen to provide cover from the valley floor and from the lower ridgelines. They hadn't planned for a threat from 800 meters above them. Target 3. A mortar crew preparing to fire on the Marine casualty collection point. 3 men, working efficiently to drop rounds into the tube. Alex fired 3 times in quick succession. The first shot took the gunner. The second took the assistant. The third struck the mortar tube itself, rendering it inoperable. The Marine's tactical frequency erupted with confused chatter. Did anyone see that? Somebody just took out the mortar team on our 6. Where the hell is that fire coming from? Doesn't matter. Keep shooting. Alex transitioned to her next priority target, an insurgent technical, a pickup truck with a Desheke heavy machine gun mounted in the bed. The weapon was devastating against Marine positions, its 12.7mm rounds punching through their limited cover. The vehicle was moving, which complicated the shot. Range 1,423 meters and increasing as the truck repositioned. Alex tracked the vehicle's movement, calculated its speed, led the target by the appropriate amount. She fired. The round struck the heavy machine gun's gunner in the upper torso. The truck swerved, the dead gunner's weight pulling the weapon to one side. Before they could recover, Alex fired again, this time aiming for the driver. The technical veered off the road and crashed into a boulder. 4 minutes, 7 shots, 8 enemy fighters killed or incapacitated. 3 crew-served weapons neutralized. The insurgents were now actively trying to locate her position, some firing blindly toward the ridgelines. But Alex was so far above them, at such an extreme angle, that their return fire fell harmlessly short. She worked methodically, professionally, choosing targets by priority of threat. Squad leaders coordinating attacks, machine gun teams pinning down Marines, mortar crews preparing to fire, RPG teams moving to flanking positions. Each shot required calculation. Each shot required perfect execution. There was no room for error at these distances. The Marines, energized by unexpected support, began returning more effective fire. Their defensive perimeter stabilized. Insurgent assaults faltered as key leaders fell to unseen fire. Through her scope, Alex watched a young Marine, blood-streaked but determined, raise his fist toward the sky in a gesture of defiance and gratitude. She was already lining up her next shot. The insurgents weren't fools. After losing 17 fighters to precise long-range fire, they adapted. Alex watched through her scope as enemy forces began repositioning, moving into areas with overhead cover, using terrain more defensively. More importantly, she saw 3 teams of 2 men each begin moving deliberately toward the upper ridgelines, carrying Dragunov SVD rifles. Counter-sniper teams. They'd finally figured out roughly where she was shooting from. The tactical calculus changed instantly. Alex was no longer the unseen predator. She'd become a target herself. She transitioned to a secondary firing position 20 meters east of her original location, moving quickly but carefully across the exposed summit. The wind had intensified, gusting hard enough to affect her balance. Dark clouds were rolling in from the north, promising snow within the hour. From her new position, Alex glassed the ridgelines below, searching for the counter-sniper teams. Found one pair approximately 400 meters below her position, methodically checking potential hides with their optics. They were good, experienced. They moved with the confidence of men who'd hunted snipers before. Alex waited, controlling her breathing, finger outside the trigger guard. Patience was as important as marksmanship. The moment one of them exposed himself to take a shot, there. The spotter raised binoculars, scanning the summit. His partner settled behind his rifle, searching for targets through his scope. Range, 412 meters, almost point blank by her recent standards, but the downward angle was severe, and the wind was swirling unpredictably around the mountain face. Alex fired. The spotter dropped. The shooter immediately rolled behind cover, denying her a second shot. Return fire came within seconds. The insurgent sniper was firing blind, hoping to suppress her, but several rounds cracked past close enough that Alex heard their passage. She low-crawled to yet another position, knowing that every muzzle flash gave away her location. This was the deadly game within the larger battle. While Alex hunted insurgent leaders and crew-served weapons, the counter-sniper teams hunted her. If they killed her, the Marines below lost their edge. If she killed them, she could continue working unimpeded. Through her scope, she found the second counter-sniper team. They'd positioned themselves well, using a cluster of boulders for cover while maintaining good observation angles. The spotter was calling corrections to the shooter, who was scanning the summit systematically. Alex made a decision. She fired at the boulder directly in front of the spotter's face. The round sparked off the rock, sending fragments into the man's eyes. He jerked back, temporarily blinded. His partner broke cover to help him. Fatal mistake. Alex's second shot took the shooter's center mass. He fell, his Dragunov clattering down the rocks. But the engagement had cost her time. While she'd been dealing with the counter-sniper teams, insurgent forces had regained some momentum against the battalion perimeter. A gap had opened in the Marines' northern defenses. Enemy fighters were exploiting it, pushing forward with grenades and automatic weapons fire. Alex shifted focus immediately. The counter-snipers would have to wait. She identified the assault element leader, a large man with a chest rig full of magazines, directing his fighters forward. Range, 1,534 meters. Heavy crosswind, target moving at an angle. She fired. The insurgent leader stumbled but didn't fall. She'd hit him, but not fatally. He dropped behind cover, shouting orders. Alex adjusted her aim slightly, waited for him to expose himself again. When he rose to signal his fighters, she fired again. This time, the shot was perfect. He collapsed. The assault faltered. Marines poured fire into the gap, driving the insurgents back. A radio transmission cut through the tactical frequency, weak but clear. Unknown sniper, if you can hear this transmission. Thank you. You just saved 3rd Platoon's ass. Keep shooting. Wolfpack 6 out. Lieutenant Colonel Bradshaw. He didn't know who she was, didn't know she was violating orders. He just knew someone was keeping his Marines alive. Alex chambered another round and kept working. By 18:30 hours, Alex had been shooting for 45 minutes. Her shoulder was bruised from recoil. Her hands ached from the cold. Her ammunition supply had dropped to less than 40 rounds. But the tactical situation had transformed. The insurgent assault had stalled. Their command structure was shattered, with senior leaders dead or wounded. Their crew-served weapons were neutralized or suppressed. Their fighters, demoralized by taking casualties from an enemy they couldn't locate, had begun withdrawing to more defensive positions. The Marines, sensing the shift, launched a coordinated counterattack. Alex watched through her scope as squads that had been pinned down for hours now moved aggressively, reclaiming lost ground, consolidating their perimeter, evacuating wounded to more secure positions. The battalion was battered, bleeding, but no longer on the verge of annihilation. Then she saw the final threat. Approximately 60 insurgent fighters, the reserve force that command had worried about provoking, were moving rapidly from the valley's northern entrance. Fresh troops with full ammunition loads and crew-served weapons. If they hit the exhausted Marines now, they could still turn the battle. Alex's radio crackled on the secondary frequency. Hayes, his voice tight with urgency. Alex, I've got eyes on a large enemy force moving south down the valley. They're going to hit the battalion's northern perimeter in less than 10 minutes. You need to slow them down. She was already acquiring targets. The insurgent column was moving in a tactical formation, disciplined and alert. They knew a battle was occurring ahead. They were ready for contact. But they weren't ready for fire from 1,700 meters above them. Alex began working the column methodically. Starting from the front, she fired, worked the bolt, acquired the next target, fired again. The 168-grain bullets fell from the sky like judgment, striking with precision that seemed impossible at this range. In these conditions, the column's lead element collapsed into chaos. Fighters dove for cover. Officers shouted orders. They returned fire toward the valley ridgelines, having no concept that the threat came from so far above. Alex shifted targets to the column's middle section, where leaders were attempting to reorganize. She dropped 3 in quick succession, then targeted a machine gun team setting up to provide covering fire. The insurgent advance stopped completely. The psychological impact of taking accurate fire from an unknown location, watching comrades fall without being able to effectively return fire, broke their momentum. Through her scope, Alex saw them beginning to withdraw, pulling back toward the valley entrance, dragging their wounded, abandoning their assault. On the valley floor, Marine units were linking up, forming a stronger defensive line, redistributing ammunition. Bradshaw's voice came through on the tactical frequency, steady despite everything his battalion had endured. All Wolfpack elements, enemy is breaking contact. Maintain security. Medevac birds are inbound. ETA, 12 minutes. Weather's clearing. We're going to get our wounded out. Outstanding work, Marines. Outstanding. Alex lowered her rifle. Her body was shaking, partly from cold, partly from exhaustion, partly from the adrenaline crash as the immediate crisis passed. She'd fired 53 rounds in 45 minutes. By her count, she'd killed or wounded 37 enemy fighters, destroyed or disabled 9 crew-served weapons, and disrupted at least 4 separate insurgent assaults. The Marines of Battalion 2/7 would live. Not all of them. The casualties had been severe. But the unit would survive as a functional fighting force instead of being annihilated in a Mafgan valley. She sat back against a boulder and allowed herself one long, shaking breath. Then, she heard the helicopter rotors in the distance, coming to save the people she'd kept alive long enough to save. Sergeant Alex Rowan was arrested 3 hours after descending from Ridge 47. Major Frost herself placed Alex in restraints, her face unreadable as she read the charges. Willful disobedience of orders, unauthorized engagement of enemy forces, violation of rules of engagement, conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline. You understand I have to do this, Frost said quietly as military police escorted Alex to a holding facility. I understand, ma'am. You're going to prison, Alex. Even if they believe you saved lives, you still violated direct orders during combat operations. There's no gray area here. I know. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 72 hours later at FOB Wilderness. Alex sat in the defendant's chair, facing a panel of 3 field-grade officers tasked with determining if court-martial proceedings were warranted. The prosecuting attorney, a captain from the Judge Advocate General's Corps, laid out the case efficiently. The charges were clear. The evidence was incontrovertible. Sergeant Rowan had willfully disobeyed explicit orders from her commanding officer during combat operations. The testimony of Corporal Hayes confirmed it. Rowan's own written statement admitted it. The defense may present its case, the panel president announced. Alex's assigned defense attorney, a tired-looking major named Patterson, stood. Sir, the defense calls Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Bradshaw. The battalion commander entered the hearing room. His uniform was still dusty from the field. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, but he moved with the bearing of a Marine officer who'd brought his unit through hell. Colonel Bradshaw, Patterson began. Please describe the tactical situation your battalion faced in Coast Valley on November 12th. Bradshaw's testimony was precise and devastating. He described being ambushed by a numerically superior force. He described the breakdown in fire support and medevac. He described watching his Marines die while waiting for help that wasn't coming. Then something changed, Bradshaw said. At approximately 1,747 hours, enemy leadership and crew-served weapons began taking extremely accurate long-range fire. The source was unknown, but the effect was immediate and dramatic. Enemy assaults faltered. Their command and control broke down. It gave my Marines the breathing room they needed to establish an effective defense. Do you know who was providing that fire, Colonel? I do now. Sergeant Rowan, from her position on Ridge 47. Bradshaw looked directly at Alex. Sergeant, attention. Alex stood. I am told you violated orders to provide that fire support. Is that accurate? Yes, sir. Then I want you to know that your violation of orders saved my battalion. We ran a tactical analysis. Without the suppression and elimination of those 37 enemy personnel and 9 crew-served weapons during that critical 45-minute window, we estimate our casualty rate would have exceeded 70%. Battalion 2/7 would have been combat ineffective. Many of my Marines would have died. His voice hardened. So you'll forgive me, Sergeant, if I find it difficult to condemn you for saving their lives. The hearing room erupted. Patterson called witness after witness. Marines who'd been pinned down until Alex's fire freed them. Medical personnel who described treating the wounded she'd kept alive. Intelligence analysts who presented data showing the mathematical improbability of the battalion surviving without the intervention she provided. By the hearing's end, the panel faced an impossible situation. The law was clear. Orders had been violated. But the result was 620 Marines who would go home to their families instead of going home in boxes. The panel president looked at Alex for a long moment. Then he spoke the words that would define her career. All charges dismissed. This hearing is concluded. The dismissal of charges didn't end the story. It began something else entirely. Within 48 hours, the details of what became known as the Ridge 47 incident had spread throughout Marine Corps bases worldwide. A female scout sniper had violated direct orders to single-handedly shift the balance of a major engagement, saving an entire battalion from annihilation through skill, courage, and a willingness to sacrifice her career for her fellow Marines. The institutional response was complicated. Senior leadership couldn't publicly celebrate insubordination, but they also couldn't ignore what Alex had accomplished. The compromise was quiet recognition. Her official record made no mention of the incident. Unofficially, she received a Navy Commendation Medal with Valor device presented in a private ceremony with no media present. But among the Marines themselves, among the men and women who fought in the dirt and mountains of Afghanistan, Alex Rowan became something more than a decorated NCO. They called her the Silent Valkyrie. The name emerged from Battalion 2/7, spread by the survivors who'd heard the unseen rifles saving their lives, who'd watched enemy positions fall to impossible shots from an impossible angle. In Norse mythology, Valkyries chose who would live and die in battle. Alex had made her choices from a mountaintop, her rifle the instrument of salvation. 3 months after Coast Valley, Alex stood alone on Ridge 47 during a rare day off. The valley below was quiet, peaceful, showing no evidence of the violence that had unfolded there. Snow had covered the scars. Her radio crackled. "Valkyrie, this is Wolfpack 6. Alex smiled slightly at the call sign that had followed her despite her protests. "Go ahead, Colonel." "Got a situation developing in Kunar Province. Heavy contact, battalion-sized element pinned down. Air support is delayed. They're asking specifically for you." "Understood. I'll be at the flight line in 20 minutes. "Alex." Bradshaw's voice carried a weight beyond the immediate tactical situation. "They're asking for you because you're the best, but also because you gave them something we've been losing. Proof that we don't abandon our people. That someone, somewhere, is watching our backs. We watch each other's backs, sir. That's what Marines do." "Indeed." Wolfpack 6 out. Alex shouldered her rifle and began the descent from Ridge 47. The path down was easier than the climb up had been that November day. Everything was easier now, in a way. She'd faced her fears about challenging orders. She'd proven, to herself if no one else, that sometimes the right decision meant accepting the consequences of being wrong. But she hadn't been wrong. As she walked, she thought about Corporal Jennings, who'd called for help into the darkness. He'd survived his wounds, returned home to his family in Ohio. He'd sent her a letter, simple and heartfelt. "Ma'am, thank you for hearing me. Thank you for caring enough to answer." 620 Marines had walked out of Coast Valley. Some wounded, some traumatized, all changed by what they'd endured, but alive, able to return to families, to continue their lives, to contribute to something beyond that single battle. That was worth a court-martial that never happened, worth the risk of a career she'd built over 12 years, worth standing alone on a mountain and choosing to fight. The helicopter was warming up when she arrived at the flight line. Another mission, another chance to do what she trained for, what she was good at, what mattered. Alex climbed aboard, settled into her seat, and began preparing her rifle for whatever came next. 1 year later, at Marine Corps Base Quantico, Alex stood in formation as the Commandant of the Marine Corps pinned the Navy Cross to her uniform. The citation was carefully worded, making no mention of violated orders or institutional friction. It spoke only of heroism, skill, and devotion to fellow Marines. The audience included every surviving member of Battalion 2/7 who could attend. They stood when she received the medal, a wall of dress blues and pride. During the reception afterward, a young lance corporal approached nervously, fresh out of scout sniper school, eager and uncertain the way all new snipers were. "Ma'am, I just wanted to say, you're the reason I volunteered for this job. I read about Coast Valley, about what you did. I want to be that good. I want to make that kind of difference." Alex looked at the young Marine, saw herself years earlier, full of determination and doubt, and the fierce desire to prove herself worthy of the uniform. "Then, remember something," Alex said. "The rifle makes you dangerous. The training makes you effective. But what makes you a Marine is knowing when the mission matters more than the orders. When saving lives matters more than saving face. Can you remember that?" "Yes, ma'am. Always." "Then you'll do fine." Alex smiled. "Welcome to the profession."